Night falls over the Russian forest, c. 750 AD, as chill air shivers through black firs and dawnless bog. This is a land without roads. Ancient rivers serve as thoroughfares, their dark currents channeling the pulse of forgotten millennia. The only fires flicker in distant Slavic clearings, framed by wood smoke and thatched rooftops. Somewhere beyond this gloom, the aurora stains the northern sky, a foreshadow of movement on the horizon. Before this landscape becomes the heart of a storied realm, it is raw, primeval, untouched by the ambitions of newcomers. The land is harsh, dense with birch, choky with marsh, yet teeming with silent movement, elk herds, beavers, and the broad-shouldered aurochs. Human settlements cluster on high ground along riverbanks, their numbers small. Novgorod's future grounds support just a handful of wooden buildings, a few dozen souls trading fish, grain, and local honey. The forest yields grudging gifts: furs, sable, fox, squirrel, bartered to wandering peddlers who travel only as waterways permit. Yet the silence is unsettled. Tracks in the hoarfrost tell of more than animals. Veterans of the steppe press in from the south, Khazars, Bulgars, trading copper and salt, sometimes exacting tribute from weaker neighboring tribes. The local Slavs and Finnics farm. Small earth plots, tilling buckwheat and rye, or fishing through ice-clad rivers. They share the dark with legends, tales of spirits that haunt the willow groves, warnings about strangers with blue eyes, and mail shirts recently whispered in the timber-long evenings. In this ancient twilight, history lies in wait. The stage is set, the rivers direct as arteries, ready for a new arrival. The northern forest slumbers, but not for long. Dawn is moments away. In the next hour, ripples on the Baltic will announce the Varangians' approach. Beneath scudding clouds, somewhere off the stormy Baltic coast, c. 750, 800 AD, Norse longships slice through wind-raked swells. Clinker-built hulls stretch 20 meters stem to stern, their pine timbers tar-sealed against salt spray and whitecaps. Men row through freezing gusts, 30 to a boat, chainmail glinting between shaggy beards and tunics dyed ochre or madder. The journey eastward is grueling, but rumors of tributary rivers rich with pelt, wax, and untold silver blunt the edge of hardship. Day turns electric as sky and sea merge in leaden indigo. The fleet leapfrogs from island to skerry, sometimes hugging the curve of Gotland or sweeping south to Courland's bleak shoals. Each nightfall brings tense landfalls. The Norsemen scan silhouettes on remote shorelines, measuring the fires of rival chieftains against the risk of ambush. It is both invasion and migration. Warriors, traders, and a handful of women with caskets of amber and combs made from whalebone. Numbers matter. Archaeological surveys show dozens of ships per year by c. 780, their cargoes heavy with reindeer hides and arm rings. By c. 800, the Baltic's northern rim bristles with settlement traces. Birka, Hedeby, and Apuole, each swelling to populations nearing 1,000, seasonal hubs alive with barter. The Varangians, as chroniclers would call them, fan outward from upland and owland, tightening the space between flight and colonization. The creak of steering oars and the drumbeat of splash and haul grow familiar music along this corridor. Always looming, south and eastward, are uncharted routes, rivers tumbling from dusk-colored forests into the open palm of Slavic frontiers. Everything converges toward the vast continent, promising struggle, fortune, or a nameless grave beneath reeds. Morning fog clings to the banks of the broad Volga, c. 800 to 850 AD, as Varangian longships nose upstream where larches bow over the waterline. Here, the Great Silver Road unfurls, a liquid highway binding the frostbitten north to the golden markets of Baghdad. Every dawn, the river flashes with pelts. Squirrel, sable, marten, traded out of pine-dark villages for slivers of hammered silver dirhams and fistfuls of rare goods. By mid-century, the traffic surges. Arab geographers, writing from Samarra in c. 840, note the arrival of fair-haired Russ's merchants at the banks of the Caspian. Their holds groan with wax, honey, fur, and captured slaves from conquered tribes. In return, they collect not only coins, but bolts of silk and copper kettles from steppe traders bound for Persia. The finds rack up. In Swedish soil alone, archaeologists will later recover over 80,000 Arabic silver coins, direct evidence of these exchanges. The Volga's power lies not just in its length, 3,500 kilometers dividing dense North European forests from arid southern steppe, but in its status as a thoroughfare beyond petty tribal boundaries. Forts punctuate the bends, sometimes little more than palisaded camps, sometimes sprawling emporia where commerce swallows any memory of war. A single cargo, one ship, perhaps 15 men, might carry 300 kilos of fur, the equivalent of dozens of annual harvests for a humble Slavic farmer. The Silver Road forges a new economic cosmos. Each coin, weighted and tested, becomes both artifact and passport, smoothing alliances, feeding future expansion, and guaranteeing that Norse ambition will ripple far deeper into the wild forest rivers. Shadows lengthen across the water, marking the dawn of a new era, one stitched together by greed, risk, and the call of distant treasure. Dense lowland fog lifts as sunbeams spear the riverside just north of Lake Ilmen, c. 830 AD, where Slavic settlements busy themselves after winter's pause. Thatched longhouses cluster along the banks, their walls rubbed with clay against the damp. Smoke from hearth fires merges with morning mist. Here, the Varangians first make lasting contact, not with an empty wilderness, but with villages already alive with barter and wary hospitality. The arrival of the newcomers is abrupt and unmistakable. Norsemen stride up from their landing, bristling with axes, mail shirts, and foreign speech, their faces both curiosity and threat to local elders. The Slavs, skilled woodworkers and farmers, possess their own traditions. They brew mead from fermented honey, keep pigs and sheep in forest enclosures, and sow barley across river terraces in spring. Their villages rarely hold more than 100 people, but each ringed hamlet forms part of broader tribal networks, like the Ilmen Slavs or Krivichs, who send smoke signals to warn or summon aid. Exchange is cautious but fruitful. Varangians offer prized Baltic goods, amber, glass beads, iron blades, while receiving valuable furs, wax, and, occasionally, local knowledge about routes and seasonal hazards. Over time, a rhythm emerges. Trade ships moor for a few weeks at a time, warriors sometimes guarding their cargoes, sometimes seeking alliances sealed by token gift or intermarriage. Yet the meeting is never simple. Raids erupt when patience fails, or alcohol fuels mistrust, and charred longhouses along the Volkhov testify to the violent scarring these first entanglements. By the close of the 9th century, Slavic and Norse communities are entwined in an unsettled peace, neither total conquest nor pure partnership, but a coexistence marked by wary respect. This riverside mingling lays the groundwork for a hybrid world, neither fully Scandinavian nor wholly Slavic, but something altogether new. Low early morning light gilds the horizon as Varangian scouts spy the glimmer of gold domes far to the south, c. 860 AD, and whispers of Byzantium reach every campfire along the Dnieper. Constantinople, queen of cities, shimmers in rumor and legend, drawing restless men from pine-dark riverbanks to embark on perilous journeys through wild, unfamiliar lands. The road is no simple voyage. Instead, it is stitched together with portages where ships are dragged overland, past brambled marshes and beneath looming spruce, sometimes for days at a time. Those few who return from the journey speak of wonders. In churchyards of far-off Novgorod, wide-eyed travelers describe marble archways, mosaics flecked with lapis and gold, and bustling markets where silks from Cathay mingle with wheat from Anatolia. Byzantine coins, solidus, heavy with Christ's image, begin to appear in tributes and hoards back north, a hard currency testifying to the distances crossed. Slavic and Finnic guides, paid in silver or cattle, chart out the best byways past rapids and bandit havens as Norse ships slither down the Dnieper and over the Volga portages in search of treasure. This epic southward odyssey is not only a quest for commerce, but a spiritual and martial trial. The so-called route from the Varangians to the Greeks will be memorialized in centuries of chronicles, but in this moment it is loaded with peril and promise. Each leg, past Lakes Ladoga and Ilmen, along the twisting Dnieper from Smolensk to Kiev, lingers with the taste of hardship, the loss of companions to sudden storms or arrow ambushes. Yet the miraculous survival of those who reach the shadowed walls of Constantinople, or Miklagard as they call it, cements tales of glory all across the Norse world. These early encounters and ambitions focus Varangian energies ever southward. Denvered by growing thirst for gold, the icon-laden city on the Bosporus eclipses lesser goals, setting the trajectory for generations desperate to seize their share of Byzantium's dazzling riches. Under iron-gray skies in the high forests near the Volkhov, c. 862 AD, leaders like Rurik establish their outposts at Novgorod, a strategic bend on the river's broad shoulder nestled against misty pine. Here, the scattered ambitions of warring Norsemen concentrate into the first durable power center, mutating from bands of traders and raiders into rulers of a fledgling order. The town itself is rudimentary. Its wooden palisades rise quickly, crowned with sawed plank towers and simple gates, enclosing just a few dozen log buildings organized around communal hearths. Rurik's arrival, chronicled in the primary chronicle and backed by clusters of Scandinavian grave goods, marks a seismic historical pivot. Local Slavs and Finnics, exhausted by years of intertribal strife and predation from their north-roving guests, call upon these iron-willed strangers to arbitrate and defend. With a retinue numbering fewer than 200 at first, Rurik enforces tribute collection, divides plots among his lieutenants, and imposes basic justice. Within a year, Novgorod's influence circles out as smaller settlements, from Lake Ilmen to the southern Mesta, recognize its overlordship. The settlement grows, slowly at first, then by fits and starts, as Norse, Slavic, and Finnic customs merge into something sturdier and more complex than any single tradition. Tribal assemblies still convene beside the river, setting the model for later Vetch councils, but real power accumulates in the palisaded hands of the Varangian elite. Annual winter fairs swell the population above 1,000 by c. 900, with goods from the Baltic, Middle East, and steppe jostling for sale within the timber walls. Against the backbeat of uncertainty, the town endures frost, fire, and the ever-present threat of rival claimants. Out of these rough beginnings, a lasting statelet emerges, defensive, multicultural, and ready to influence not just its own icy enclaves, but a new, wider world, trembling on the far bank of history. Dawn smolders to life over the river bluffs of central Ukraine, c. 870 AD, as armored shadows flicker on Kiev's untamed skyline. Here, far from the birch-thick northern woods, rival Varangian captains Askold and Dir seize command, breaking away from Novgorod's orbit to carve out their own legacy. The Dnieper's midstream positions the city as a linchpin. Control Kiev and you police both river traffic and the sprawling trade that strings north to south. Kiev's beginnings as a power center are gritty and precarious. Fortified only by earth ramparts, wooden stockades, and a scattering of mud daub houses, the site supports fewer than 2,000 people, fishermen, traders, Slavic farmers, and a growing garrison of Norse warriors. Askold and Dir, leveraging both martial steel and shrewd negotiation, demand tribute from local Polian Slavs, converting their military threat into economic advantage. Every spring, fleets moor below Kiev's bluffs, their cargoes swollen by the spoils of tribute and southern commerce. Factionalism simmers below the surface. Askold and Dir's breakaway threatens Novgorodian unity, forcing rival Varangian and Slavic families to declare for one emerging power or another. Small skirmishes erupt on wooded islets or through the narrow ravines that frame the city, casualties mounting in seasonal bursts, 20 here, 50 there, as each raid or feud leaves its mark on the battered ramparts. Despite the discord, the city crystallizes into a strategic hub, referenced in both Norse sagas and Byzantine chronicles as the mother of Rus's cities. By staking their claim in Kiev, Askold and Dir set the future stage for larger statehood, and for brutal cycles of alliance and betrayal that will echo downriver and across generations. A hard frost crackles beneath Varangian boots as they stride into Slavic and Finnic villages, c. 870–900 AD, demanding tribute in coin, furs, and grain. These newcomers, no longer mere traders but ruling lords, set the rhythms of extraction, levying the Danigeld, or Polyudi, the annual circuit of collection that binds local tribes in uneasy submission. Axes glint and chests fill. One year's haul might sweep up nearly a ton of silver coins, 10,000 pelts, and the winter surplus from hundreds of households. Resistance festers at the edges of this order. Tribal elders, faces furrowed by wind and worry, measure out tribute with gritted patience, calculating whether compliance or rebellion best serves their kin. When patience snaps, violence returns. Varangian warbands punish uprisings ruthlessly, torching settlements and slaughtering holdouts, with as many as 200 villagers killed in a single punitive season. Burned ruins and scattered bones stand as cold reminders of failed defiance, haunting winter fields from the upper Danube to the Volga's sources. Tribute, however, ushers in alien rhythms of commerce. As silver, wax, and wheat flow northward, back toward burgeoning river capitals, the Varangians redistribute some largesse, binding ambitious local families to their ranks. At annual markets, elect groups of Slavic artisans and Finnic hunters gain privileged access to imported goods, steel knives, fine glass, and vividly dyed textiles. This dual system, violence and patronage, builds an uneasy peace across the riverine patchwork, growing both resentment and prosperity, year by year. The age of tribute carves out new lines of hierarchy and forever alters what it means to rule these wild frontiers. Each passing season deepens both the wounds and the wealth produced by Varangian dominance, seeding future revolts, but also new possibilities impossible to undo. As autumn fog thickens over the Dnieper's sweeping curves, c. 882 AD, Oleg and his warband approach the gates of Kiev under a shroud of secrecy. Legends insist he binds his stallion to the city's gates, hammers out the opposition, and claims Kiev as the mother of Rus's cities, a seminal pivot from loose tribal alliance to embryonic empire. Oleg's conquest is both ferocious and calculating. His retinue outnumbers the local defenders 2 to 1, with nearly 1,000 armored warriors pressing from the riverbanks. Oleg's triumph is a masterstroke of logistics. After the swift elimination of Askold and Deer, led away under pretense and summarily executed, he wastes no time consolidating power. New fortifications enclose the settlement. Timber stockades, watchtowers, and simple ditches expand Kiev's footprint by a third, sheltering a mixed population of Norse and Slavic families swelling to more than 3,000 by the harvest of 885. He commands tribute from the surrounding Polian, Derevlian, and Severian tribes, stacking his coffers with silver, grain, honey, and seasonal manpower. Control of Kiev transforms Varangian influence entirely. It is now a nerve center for commerce and conquest. From this stronghold, Oleg launches multi-pronged raids downriver toward the Black Sea, sending embassies as far as Constantinople by 907 and negotiating tribute from the Byzantines under force of threat. Archaeological finds along the Dnieper, arrowheads, Byzantine amphorae, tile fragments underscore the city's new prominence as an axis between east and west. With the founding of Kiev under a single, iron-fisted ruler, Rus' pivots from fractious outsider presence to unified state-building. Oleg's victory reimagines the very landscape, establishing a capital that will shape centuries of destiny for Varangians, Slavs, and every tribe whose fortunes are pinned to the swollen river's course. Low sun flares over the Pontic steppe as Rus' longboats, c. 900–940 AD, push south toward the Caspian and Black Seas, intent on commerce with the distant Abbasid Caliphate. Each vessel carries not just warriors, but bargained cargo, squirrel and sable pelts, wax, honey, and enslaved prisoners from the northern forests. In exchange, lavish prizes filter north, forged silver dirhams, silk textiles, delicate glass, and rare spices. Mute testimony to an ancient pipeline linking Baltic shores with Islamic civilization. Arabic chroniclers like Ibn Fadlan record the spectacle firsthand. In c. 922, he witnesses Rus' traders camped in great numbers on the Volga's banks, hundreds of tents clustered near Bulgar markets, their numbers swelling each spring to more than 1,000. Market scenes buzz with alleys of barter. Varangians hawk beaver pelts for coin, or trade forest slaves at 2 dinars a head, while emissaries haggle over Mongol horses, damask, or regional wine. Abbasid coins, struck in Samarra or Baghdad, soon pepper the riverfront and northern forests. Swedish dig sites will reveal over 85,000 such dirhams hoarded in Scandinavian earth. This cosmopolitan commerce expands horizons. Varangian envoys cross mountain and river, embedding themselves as both predators and partners in Byzantine, Khazar, and Persian politics. By the early 10th century, the route from Novgorod to Baghdad, over 4,000 kilometers, takes 6 or 7 weeks with favorable water and weather, a feat of endurance and navigation. Slave capture and fur hunting reshape life across the north. Annual tallies overshoot 5,000 humans sold in a single good year and 3 tons of pelts exchanged for dirham. Flowing ever south and north, these barter lines fuse the remote forest world of the Varangians to ancient silk roads. The Caliphate's gold and silver bring both enrichment and temptation, spurring the next wave of ambition and deadly conflict on the horizon. Summer haze blurs the horizon as dragon-prowed longships converge on the glimmering fortifications of Constantinople, c. 941 AD. This is the apex of Varangian martial ambition. A flotilla of more than 2,000 warboats stirs the Bosporus, their keels bristling with 36 warriors apiece, axes and spears poised for mayhem. On the city's ramparts, the Byzantine defenders brace for the onslaught, faces set against walls standing over 12 meters high and 5 meters thick, bearing testimony to centuries of siegecraft. The first clash is a study in contrast. Brute force meets inherited sophistication. Rus's warriors, fearless and quick, hammer at the Theodosian walls and torch the wealthy suburbs ringing the Golden Horn. Their commanders, emboldened by decades of victories upriver, throw scores of men into the breach, only to be met with the infernal defense of Greek fire. This Byzantine secret weapon, a petroleum-based incendiary, hurls screaming jets of flame across the water, setting dozens of longships ablaze, drowning hundreds and incinerating entire companies in minutes. Casualties mount at sickening pace. Accounts claim the Varangians lose at least 500 boats in the opening hours, their crews either immolated or slaughtered in panicked rout. Those who survive are swept up in a lethal pursuit along the Marmara coast, with fewer than half reaching safe harbor north of the city. The failed assault leaves its mark in the sagas, where tales of treasure are abruptly replaced by laments for comrades burned beneath Byzantine towers. The impact is profound and far-reaching. The Byzantines, both awed and alarmed, negotiate tough new treaties in 945, limiting Varangian access but also opening the door for future mercenary service. The haunting glare of the city's defenses puts a brake on unchecked Rus's expansion, but plants the seed of another, subtler relationship, one built just as much on intrigue and service as brute force. Late summer wind rattles tall grass on the Pontic steppe, c. 950, as Varangian warriors stride between warring tribes and burning encampments, sometimes as feared raiders, sometimes as impromptu peacemakers. The steppe is a clash point, home to Khazars, Pechenegs, Bulgars, and nomads, where Varangians move between battle and brokerage, each role shifting with the turning of the seasons or fortune's whim. The line between pillager and arbiter blurs. One week, Varangian bands descend on a Khazar outpost for plunder. The next, they negotiate hostage swaps between feuding steppe chieftains. Their presence brings both destruction and order. A singed village of 300 may be razed in reprisal for resisting tribute, with spoils split among a dozen Norse captains, but rival khans often court these strangers for their legendary steel and mercenary acumen. Early treaties, found in contemporary Arab and Greek texts, tally the price, sometimes a chest of silver, sometimes 50 horses, for Varangian assistance in quelling insurrections or defending river crossings. Where they strike bargains, scattered archaeological evidence, spur fragments, scale armor, and coins marks the shifting edge of their alliances. Varangian unpredictability keeps the steppe volatile, yet never fully lawless. They punish bandit bands one month, then partner in their raids the next. In larger clashes, such as Rus's Khazar confrontations of the mid-10th century, Varangians field 1,000 or more men, casualties recorded in the hundreds. River traffic reflects shifting control. Merchant convoys that once vanished in Pecheneg ambushes now sometimes pass unmolested, their safety bought with tribute, threatened by raids, or enforced by brute Norse presence. With each year, Varangian influence grows, sometimes as overlord, sometimes as broker, sometimes as ghostly avenger by torchlight. Their imprint on the steppe endures in both charred ruins and fragile truces, raising the stakes for every tribe riding under the eternal open sky. Sunrise throws golden sparks on the Dnieper's waters near Kiev, 988 AD, as Vladimir the Great gathers thousands along the riverbanks for a ritual that will define a nation. After decades of shifting faith and alliances, shamanic rites, Norse pantheons, and Byzantine envoys, the Varangians stand at the crossroads of belief. Armed faith arrives, offered by the embattled Byzantines. Vladimir negotiates baptism, marries Anna Porphyrogenita, and orders mass conversion, binding his realm to Byzantine Christianity by water and sword. This transformation is breathtaking in scope and logistics. Priests, monks, and Greek artisans flood Kiev, bearing icons, relics, and parchments, while the city's population surges toward 10,000 as new churches supplant old wooden temples. A riverine baptism turns into spectacle. Contemporary accounts estimate that up to 2,000 line up at a time, shivering or defiant, as crosses and holy water replace charms and Thor's hammer pendants. Pagan shrines tumble, their wreckage used as paving stones for the new St. Sophia's foundations. Conversion is not born by mood alone. Royal decree, military pressure, and promises of Byzantine wealth combine to bring recalcitrant Varangians to heel. Resistance flares in smaller towns. At Novgorod, armed opposition is crushed within weeks. Casualty rolls for the insurrections might reach 400 dead or exiled per city. Yet with every cross planted, Byzantine influence threads deeper into the Varangian elite. Local princes train in imperial etiquette, Slavic and Norse languages fuse with Greek, and liturgy slowly transforms daily life and law. By 990, the riverbanks that once echoed with pagan chants now ring with Byzantine chant and incense. The unity wrought through Vladimir's mass baptism forever alters the spiritual DNA of Russia, anchoring Varangian rule to the cross, and lending a cosmic legitimacy that will outlast even their swords. Frost crackles along the forest edges near Pskov, c. 950 to 1000 AD, as Varangian traders and settlers share stories around evening campfires in a babel of Old Norse and Slavic accents. The languages swirl and merge, not only in idle conversation, but in the deepest foundations of local law, custom, and even place names. In these bone-chill nights, konung for king slowly gives way to knyaz, and river ports like Ladoga and Novgorod ring out to names built from both tongues: Izborsk, Polotsk, Staraya. Written traces mark this meeting. Norse runes are scratched into wooden amulets and ivory combs, but the greater traffic is in speech and surnames. The Varangian Helgi morphs into Oleg, while Holmgarder becomes Novgorod. Burial mounds from this era display hybrid goods, Scandinavian swords ferried alongside Slavic ceramics and amber beads, skeletons sometimes interred with cross and Thor's hammer alike. By 980, local vocabularies list dozens of trade, governmental, and military loanwords stemming from the newcomers, words like vaga, weight, Attika, clan, and Tysiatsky, commander of 1,000. This language fusion is more than souvenir. It shapes mutual intelligibility and forges trust between rulers and ruled. Norse chieftains learn Slavic formulae when swearing oaths, while local elders adopt Varangian protocols of assembly and judgment. Even the structure of the emerging legal code, later the Ruskaya Pravda, reflects this entwinement, blending Scandinavian injury prices with Slavic traditional law. Through constant mingling and negotiation, the Varangians and Slavs forge a linguistic patchwork, unique, dynamic, and foundational to Russian identity. Each name on a town gate or princely brooch is proof. Out of old differences, a new song is sung. Armor gleams in the flowering meadows south of Kiev, c. 970–1000 AD, as the sons of Rurik, Sviatoslav, Yaropolk, Vladimir lead retinues of mounted warriors out from fortified strongholds, bent on carving realms of their own. Dynastic ambition now surges through the river valleys and forest tracts. Rival princely courts multiply, each one a nucleus of shifting power perched atop the ancient Varangian foundation. The struggle is relentless. Each year sees lines redrawn, allegiances sworn and shattered, with warbands riding hundreds of kilometers between Novgorod, Smolensk, and unexplored steppe reaches. Sviatoslav carves his legend on the landscape. Launching campaigns southward into Khazar lands c. 965, he commands over 20,000 men, defeats the mighty Khazar Khaganate, and wipes several fortified cities, such as Sarkal, off the map. Settlers follow in his wake, populating new frontiers with Varangian households and Slavic peasants, establishing towns like Pereyaslav and Belgorod. The spoils of war are staggering: thousands of captives, boatloads of silver, and tribute extracted from the conquered Volga Bulgars and steppe tribes. This dynastic expansion is anything but peaceful. Brothers and cousins clash in open civil war. After Sviatoslav's death in 972, his sons contest Kiev, triggering cycles of siege and assassination where body counts spiral into the hundreds. Victors distribute land, tribute rights, and fortress command posts to loyal retainers, sharp divisions codified on birch bark, then enforced by axe and fire. With every generational turn, the descendants of Rurik bind themselves more tightly to local Slavic elites, reinforcing new loyalties and hybrid identities. By the turn of the millennium, these dynasties have ruled wide. From the Baltic's icy edge to the steppe's rolling grass, populations in the tens of thousands now answering princely banners. The era of wandering Varangians gives way to entrenched royal houses, dynasties whose relentless ambition redraws the very map of Eastern Europe. Sunlight glints off marble courtyards of Constantinople c. 988–25 AD as Varangian warriors, exiled or adventuring from the north, march through the Basilica Gate to join the famed Varangian Guard. This elite corps, personal bodyguards to the Byzantine emperor, soon numbers over 6,000 at its peak, its ranks reinforced after the mass baptism of Rus's and Vladimir's gifts of sword brothers as mercenaries. Cloaked in blue, red, and gold, carrying massive axes, Danish axes, nearly 5 feet long, these Varangians cut a striking figure amid the palatial splendor. Their reputation is forged in blood and gold alike. Guard records, inscribed in Greek and runic graffiti found on the walls of Hagia Sophia, recount decades of service. Varangians fight at the Battle of Baphius, 989, defend imperial personages during coup, and are entrusted with the treasury of the empire itself. A standard salary ranges up to 480 gold numismata per year, enough to buy estate land in Scandinavia or commission a longship's worth of finery. When paid in spoils, as after the sack of Bari in 1071, loot fills dozens of ships, and runces carved into marble pillars tell of ventures stretching from Sicily to Jerusalem. For ordinary guardsmen, palace life is a paradox: strict discipline, luxurious barracks, and lunar New Years spent beneath Greek domes far from the snow-clad forests of home. In peacetime, they police the city, serve as elite riot squads, and accompany emperors on ceremonial progress across the Bosporus. Yet the Guard's fierce loyalty is legendary, enough to terrify would-be rebels and reassure imperial handlers. One riot in 1042 ends with over 400 rebels hacked down by axe-wielding Varangians in a single night. Service in the Varangian Guard seals the Norse presence in Byzantine memory, blending martial myth and imperial pageantry. By the early 11th century, the once feared invaders are now an unshakable pillar of foreign power at the heart of a Christian superstate. Lamps glow over honeyed oak tables in princely courts from Kiev to Novgorod. c. 1050 AD, as Varangian and Slavic dignitaries arrange marriages that will bind realms and rewrite the future. The dynastic web spun from Varangian roots now extends far beyond the river valleys. Anna of Kiev marries Henry I of France, while dozens of Russian princesses journeyed to Hungary, Poland, and even Norway, each alliance consolidating power and weaving cultural ties across Eurasia. Court processions stretch for hundreds of meters, velvet, sable trim, Orthodox icons gleaming, as they escort brides to foreign capitals, trailed by retinues of warriors and priests. These unions are much more than private contracts. Each royal marriage secures trade privileges, border truces, or access to foreign armies. Anna's marriage in 1051 signals deeper partnerships, boosting French demand for Eastern wax and caviar, and feeding the flow of Byzantine and Norse goods westward. Marriages with Polish, Hungarian, or Swedish houses buffer the Rus against hostile neighbors, their clauses written in Slavic, Latin, and sometimes Old Norse to ease misunderstandings. Over 60 named princesses and princes travel abroad from 980 to 1100, some of them founding whole new dynasties in their adoptive lands. Blood mingles with culture, transforming language, ritual, and even architecture. The blending is visible in frescoed churches, hybrid court protocols, and the international flavor of mercenary bands, Byzantine coin mingling with Frankish silver in Novgorod's coffers, Swedes and Hungarians buried beside Slavs on princely estates. The bride's price for a prominent foreign princess can reach 100 pounds of silver, 5 wagon loads of furs, or a suite of Byzantine gifts. Through these marital alliances, Varangian bloodline and legacy entwine tightly with the monarchies of medieval Europe. Each union forges connections and loyalties that outlive any one reign, exporting the Varangian story into royal houses from Paris to Krakow, and solidifying the patchwork fabric of medieval Eurasia. River ice breaks on the Dnieper, c. 1050 AD, as seasoned Varangian traders whisper the phrase, "From the Varangians to the Greeks," a living password for passage and profit on the Great Waterway. This experience, part linguistic shibboleth and part practical guide, functions as a code. Those who know every bend, rapid, and portage unlock fortunes, while the unwary founder among splintered boats and river thieves. The password is a signifier of power, evidence of the hard-won expertise separating master merchant from mere interloper. Controlling these river corridors is a matter of scale and cunning. By the mid-11th century, up to 20 main fortifications anchor key points along the Dnieper and Volga, each garrisoned by Slavic militias, Norse-descended nobles, and mercantile syndicates. Controlled portages, such as those at Smolensk or Lyubech, extract passage tolls, 1 silver coin per crew, or a tenth of cargo value, yielding annual revenues in the thousands of hryvnias. The total volume of trade funneled through these arteries measures in tons. Ship manifests from the ARA list over 2,000 kilos of wax, 3,000 kilos of honey, and twice as much fur moving downstream in a busy season. This technical mastery translates directly into political power. Princes and merchant families dependent on safe travel grant titles, land, and monopoly rights in exchange for information, maps, or hired escorts, feeding a small class of river magnates who arbitrate disputes, protect pilgrims, and levy taxes. Secret river pass codes, sometimes literal, sometimes ritual, sometimes practical, grant allies a seat at the council table, advance marriage prospects, or open the way to distant Byzantine contracts. These passage rights consolidate the Varangians' grip on the sinews of Eastern European trade and statecraft. With every whispered password, expertly loaded barge, and successful convoy, control of the rivers cements Varangian descent as a touchstone of both wealth and legitimacy across the medieval landscape. Charred palisades and shouts of battle echo along the walls of Pereyaslav, c. 1054-1132 AD, as interdynastic wars erupt among the sons and grandsons of long-dead Varangian princes. Succession feuds now shape every corner of Rus. After the death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054, rival branches of the Rurikid family contest Kyiv, Novgorod, and the rising powers of Vladimir and Suzdal. Each spring and autumn, columns of armored riders thunder across the muddy plains. Local annals count 30 separate armed conflicts in a single generation, sometimes forcing entire districts to change allegiance in a week. The human cost is ruinous. City sieges last months. Kiev burns twice in 50 years. Pskov's ramparts are shattered in a week-long assault, and by 1100, chroniclers tally more than 7,000 dead from a decade's civil wars. Varangian-descended nobles turn axes on each other, hiring steppe Cuman mercenaries or drafted levies from Slavic townsfolk to tip the balance. Burned grain stores, abandoned villages, and lists of taken hostages document the social trauma, while once prosperous trade suffers as convoys are plundered by rival factions or blockaded out of spite. Amidst the chaos, fragments of unity persist. When princes tire of endless raiding, truces hammered out at Lyubech or Kiev briefly restore order. Councils gather the great and lesser lords, setting famine prices, dividing tribute, and imposing shifting succession formulas designed to prevent fratricide. Yet any stability is brief. Warbands loyal to this or that branch of Rurikids flare up with each new death, marriage, or betrayal. The traditions of Varangian justice evolve too, with local juries and vetch councils gaining power to challenge princely authority during periods of prolonged instability. Every cycle of civil conflict leaves the realm weaker and more fragmented, even as its lifeblood and legends flow from the same ancient Varangian foundation. The turmoil seeds future vulnerabilities, exposing the limits of conquest by sword and the fragile legacy of kin-born kings. Clouds spool over the marble spires of Palermo, c. 1100 AD, as Varangian mercenaries, descendants of Rus's princes and Norse adventurers, fight not for home, but as hired blades in foreign wars. Their axes glint not just in Byzantine palaces, but in Sicily, southern Italy, and the Crusader states, where their steel and courage are famed commodities. These far-wandering bands inscribe runes on stone, church pillars in Constantinople, graffiti at the Hagia Sophia, and even crumbling bunkers at Piraeus or Bari. The scope of their service is staggering. In 1097, over 1,000 Varangian veterans joined the First Crusade, swelling the ranks of Raymond of Toulouse and Bohemond of Taranto as they storm Antioch and Jerusalem. Sicilian counts employ companies of 200 to 300 axe-wielding Norsemen to guard Palermo against rivals, rewarding them with land, coin, or even Italian wives. In Byzantine employ, the Varangian Guard shields emperors through palace coups, defends imperial treasuries, and patrols the city during riots. One uprising in 1118 leaves over 300 dead, their bodies counted in chilling imperial records. Markers of their passage endure across the Mediterranean. The inscriptions at Hagia Sophia, like Halfdan carved these runes, attest that Norway, Sweden, Rus, and England had scions serving side by side on foreign shores. Payment is lucrative. A year's mercenary wages in gold, added to campaign spoils, could make even a middling guardsman wealthy for life. Stories of Varangian prowess and exploits echo back to the northern homelands, with new adventurers leaving home each spring to replace the fallen or retired. In this era, the Varangians become both memory and myth. Nordic ghosts woven into the campaigns, courts, and epic poetry of a dozen lands. Their swords etch stories on 3 continents, leaving behind a legacy far richer than plunder alone. Winter drapes snowy rooftops across the wooden walls of Novgorod, c. 1150–1200 AD, as the Varangians begin to vanish into the everyday tapestry of city life. The once distinct Norsemen, lords clad in wolf pelts, speaking foreign tongues, now shift into memory, their descendants wielding seals, pens, and prayer books rather than axes and shields. The city's population passes 10,000, bustling with Slavic merchants, Orthodox priests, and a polyglot mix of artisans and migrants from every corner of Europe. This transformation is gradual, marked by 1,000 small changes. Norse runes give way to Cyrillic script. Carved longships rot away as footbridges and stone wharves replace the watery frontiers. Elite titles, once konung, or jarl, turn into posadnik and tisiatsky, reflecting the shift from foreign-ruled outpost to self-confident Slavic republic. The younger generation of Varangian stock intermarry with local aristocrats, while town vechas assemble to pass laws, appoint governors, and debate policy under the shadow of St. Sophia's domes. Material traces thin out, but never vanish completely. A hoard of dirhams unearthed from a basement, a battered Swedish sword in the city armory, these become relics in the new cultural memory of Novgorod and other Russ's cities. The city's merchants still recount distant ancestors' exploits, but now it's civic charters and diplomatic envoys that win the battles and shape the laws. Culturally, a Slavic veneer covers every aspect of life, from liturgy and law to food, dress, and speech. By the dawn of the 13th century, towering above the Volkhov River, Novgorod and her kindred cities stand as proof. The Varangians, once a ruling minority, have dissolved into the tide of Rus, their legacy absorbed into the steady hum and ritual of medieval urban life. A red sunrise glows behind ruined wooden ramparts as the Mongol horde barrels into the heartlands of Rus's, c. 1240 AD, sweeping aside the last fragile remnants of Varangian-led principalities. Metal hooves drum on frozen earth. 100,000 Mongol riders, numbers chronicled in clerical records, storm fortified cities from Kyiv to Vladimir, their composite bows unleashing death at volleys of 10,000 arrows at a time. Stone walls crumble. Flame and slaughter erase the old order in a matter of months. The onslaught is systematic. Kyiv, once a Varangian stronghold now swollen to a city of 30,000, endures a weeks-long siege before its defenders are overrun. Archaeologists estimate the population drops to just 2,000 survivors, with buildings flattened and vast quarters reduced to ash. Smaller towns fare no better. Suzdal, Ryazan, and others, many founded or ruled for centuries by families with Norse roots, are pillaged, with earthen mounds giving up charred bones and shattered regalia to modern excavation. The Mongols' legendary yam system, efficient messengers and tribute collectors, quickly replaces the old tribute routes and dissolves the customs established by the Varangian age. The shockwaves spread in every direction. Refugees flood north to Novgorod and west to Polish and Baltic fortresses, carrying tales of slaughter and splintered dynasties. Mongol-appointed governors, Baskoks, take over what remains, extracting new taxes, counting survivors, dispatching envoys to the Golden Horde's distant court. Within a decade, political power in former Varangian centers is just a memory. Their fortifications and riverine networks either destroyed, repurposed, or bypassed entirely by new rulers. The Mongol storm erases the last outward signs of Varangian order, shattering the bones of the past and clearing the stage for the next cycle of Eurasian empires. In this historical avalanche, the world built by axe and river slips, at last, beneath the shadow of the steppe. Twilight burns in stone monasteries and candlelit halls, c. 1300 AD, as chroniclers and bards preserve echoes of Varangian law and legend, long after their steely axes vanish from the embattled frontiers. Old codes, first hammered out along the wild riverbanks, are inked onto parchment as Ruskaya Pravda, embedding Nordic-inspired injury prices and council precedents into the workings of medieval Russian justice. These legal relics, often cited in city courts or by princely officials, regulate everything from feud compensation and property rights to the responsibilities of military service. Scandinavian and Slavic conventions now fused. The memory of the Varangians endures not only in paperwork, but in story. Epic poems, by Lena, retell the deeds of giants and chieftains. Semi-mythic Varangians who duel with steppe monsters or broker truces over blood and gold. Monastery scribes, copying chronicles by lamplight, preserve genealogies reaching back to Rurik and his retinue, connecting new lines of Muscovite or Lithuanian princes to the rugged heroes of the forest frontier. In the process, the Varangian image morphs from brutal invader or enigmatic mercenary into a foundation myth for statehood, legal order, and the right to rule. Relics resurface in ritual. Iron axes are laid beside icons at shrines. Some villages still name their local assemblies by echoes of Varangian terms. The codes and chronicles written in this era will be cited by czars and revolutionaries alike centuries later, as both shield and banner for the evolving Russian state. When the blade rusts, the word endures, woven into songs, laws, and half-remembered stories that tether the present to a river-bound, Norse-stained dawn. Electric lights flicker in laboratories from Moscow to Stockholm, Susi. 2020 AD, as scientists and historians trace Scandinavian roots woven through modern Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian DNA. Advanced genetic studies, sampling bone from ancient kurgans and burial mounds across Ladoga and Staraya Russa, reveal Norse Y chromosome markers in up to 20% of men along the old river trade arteries, a lasting biological echo of the Varangian migration. Archaeologists, using LiDAR and drone imagery, map the vanished amber routes, exposing lost ports and forgotten outposts that once stitched together the Norse and Slavic worlds. Cultural memory, too, reawakens. Russians, Swedes, and Ukrainians revive the legacy through historical reconstruction. UNESCO recognizes the Viking route, joining Burka to Kiev, while local festivals, costumed pageants, and educational trails invite new generations to walk in the shadow of Varangian ancestors. Museums in Uppsala, Novgorod, and Moscow display hoards of dirhams, swords, and hybridized jewelry, their expertly cataloged cases drawing 100,000 visitors a year or more. In academic circles, decades of controversy over the Normanist theory, whether the Russes state began as a Scandinavian import or a native birth, are debated and revisited with every fresh discovery. The past, once relegated to myth, now pulses with data and remembrance. Modern Slavs and Scandinavians swap family stories bolstered by science. Folk songs are performed in reconstructed Old Norse at midnight reenactments. Even as new borders and identities shift, the Varangian thread winds visibly through the chronicles, genomes, and dreams of Northern Europe. Its route not finished, only transformed by the long, ageless tide of history. Dawn mist drifts along a silent northern river, present day, as the memory of the Varangians lingers, half glimpsed between the trembling pine shadows and mirrored water. Here, nature and legend mingle. Every whispering breeze, every eddy carved smooth by long-vanished keels, carries echoes of Norse songs and war cries, faint but enduring. In the hush of sunrise, the ancient routes, once highways thrumming with tribute, fleets and ambitions, are reclaimed by reeds and nesting swans, repositories not of silver and blood, but of memory. The ghosts of warriors, traders, and kings seem to flit across the landscape. A weathered axe head, unearthed by a fisherman, a crumbling ring fort now subsiding into birch groves, the shape of old canals traced in green by spring meltwater. Some say if you walk these banks at twilight, you might hear the distant creak of oars or catch the amber glow of a campfire beneath the trees. A fleeting vision, gone in the next breath. Across the north, families and storytellers keep the names alive, even as language, faith, and law have shifted 100 times. Today, drone cameras soar where longships once rode. New generations map rivers and boundaries, yet sense the same electric thrill of discovery, risk, and restless longing. Forest dreams linger among sunbeams piercing mist, while river ghosts slip quietly between worlds, never fully gone, always glimmering just at the edge of night and memory. In their wake, a world remade by dust and glory invites us to listen, faintly, to the heartbeats of the past.